Welcome to the Sean Chandler Podcast, a place to talk movies and nerd culture way too much. Joining me, as always, is Griffin Schiller. Griffin, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. And for the record, I am not a soy boy, so we're gonna go with that. That's gonna be my opening.
What an interesting way to start off the show. Also, fun things to start off the show. Two gigantic corporations decided to go to war with one another last night, so that's an awful lot of fun to kind of, for a podcast like ours, to have them decide to do that as of recently. But everybody, as you're tuning in, this is being recorded live to YouTube. So if you listen to the audio version later on from time to time, we will take in some user chats. And if you want to be a part of that experience, it happens Wednesdays around noon on my YouTube channel. And if you guys are in the live stream right now, be sure to tell your thoughts on whatever topics we are talking about, and we'll do our best to respond to any super chats that come in, especially if they are on topic. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about today. The big thing, Trolls World Tour turns out to be this massive, gigantic game changer for the industry. Of all movies to do that, Trolls World Tour.
Who would have thought?
Yeah. Yeah, it's legitimate. Who would have thought January 1st, the movie that was going to cause a gigantic stir and AMC theaters banning Universal Pictures, Trolls 2, of course. What other movie? So apparently a big, gigantic, massive hit. CEO made some statements that were not well received by AMC theaters. We're going to talk all about that and the ramifications of it all. More movie dates have been swapping around. We'll cover that pretty quickly. We talk about that stuff every week, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. Also, the Oscars are changing up their policies for just this year. A little bit of a change up, and so that they're going to allow more streaming options in all of this. And then also I want to do a little editorial on action movies at the end of this, because I've been having a bunch of conversations on Twitter that have just kind of been heartbreaking to me a little bit over the response to Extraction. Not that I think everybody should love the movie, but the specific response has been not exactly the one that I would have hoped for. But real quick, before we start diving into our topics, if you're listening to an audio version, be sure to like, rate, all of that fun stuff. If you're on the live stream, click that like button, leave a comment in the chat, trying to get as much momentum on this thing as is possible. And let's get started with our first topic of the day. And that is, as of yesterday, Universal, NBC CEOs started actually revealing just how good Trolls 2 did. We talked about this a couple of weeks back on the podcast where we knew it did great, but we weren't sure if that was like astounding numbers or just great numbers, especially for that particular movie given the circumstances. CEO comes out and basically says this thing has made $100 million from rentals in 2 weeks. It's doing better than the one that was released in theaters. And then the troublesome statement, he said, when theaters reopen, we're looking to release films on streaming still, both platforms. So let's start right here. What do we make of it now that we kind of know this streaming option, it's working. It's the real deal.
Yeah.
And I guess the other side to that, is that just a product of our time? Our literal quarantine time, is it a product of that?
No, it's not just I think the situation we're in kind of like forced the like pushed the needle a little bit into that direction. But yeah, I don't know why this is like such a crazy and weird idea, because like studios have been doing this for years. That's what straight to VOD movies are. And look, it's not like they're going to be dropping Jurassic World, Minions, whatever, like Sing 2. It's not like they're going to be dropping those on VOD, right? Like they're going to drop the big money makers in theaters. They're just mainly talking about like films that probably wouldn't have done as well at the box office that now have a chance. And because they're not, splitting profits with the theaters, they retain all of that income. So it's like, of course, a movie like Trolls 2 is going to do better on VOD than it is in theaters. And yes, the time we're currently living in probably helped it out a little bit more. But like it makes sense to me. Like maybe some, middle tier, smaller family movies like Scoob, for instance, even though that's Warner Brothers, but it's like that's perfect for VOD because like to get the whole family out to go to the theaters, like, well, yes, it's great for big event movies. It's really difficult. And I'm sure you can attest to it, like with everyone and like just getting popcorn and getting snacks and making sure everyone's like settled down and quiet. If you can do all of that at home for like a new family movie or a new animated movie, like why not? And as we'll get into with AMC's reaction, I think while I see where they're coming from, it's ridiculous to assume that their Universal is just completely upending the theater system, you know?
Right. Well, and I mean, I think, I get to take my kids to press screenings and stuff like that. And so I take them to the theaters more than most people because it doesn't cost me money. And so when we have those movies where it is like, oh, I'll take the whole family and I think like Sonic had to buy tickets opening night. And so then it was the whole family. I mean, wife, kids, let's get popcorn. And it was one of those moments when, oh yeah, this is why other people don't do this. This is really expensive. I mean, it just adds up so fast when it's that many tickets, and then popcorn for everybody. And so I think and the other side to it is also home technology has grown light years over the last 20 years. From like the year, I don't know what, like 1960 until the year 2000, TVs were kind of the same. They got a little bit bigger, but you had color TVs come in the 1960s, and they were about the same resolution for a long time. And then we started getting high definition TVs. And you think DVD technology was the top of the game until 13 years ago. DVD quality was what you could get at home. And over the last 15 years, when you switch to Blu-rays and it's high definition, and then you can get an HD TV for, $500 now, and not a small one. The deals for Black Friday last year, I was like, man, do I need to get a 65-inch 4K TV for $400 to put right over here in my little... And when you can have that high of quality just at your home, home theaters are competition for theaters now. You lose the community aspect to it, but there's also some pluses to it, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. So people are weighing all of that, and I think more and more people are discovering that sort of situation. And then, of course, having a couple years now of Netflix and some other people putting out quality content where we get a little bit more used to seeing a Chris Hemsworth, a Scorsese movie at home, it starts to rewire our brains and our expectations a little bit. But I think the test that is right now, it really is opening up so many doors and opportunities for stuff to happen. So that'll lead us into the second half of this, which is AMC's response. So some people in the chat were asking like, hey, why is AMC not showing Universal movies? So one of the very high ups NBC Universal CEOs says when theaters reopen, we're going to play movies on both. We're going to open them on both without, that's just a statement that was made. So AMC, from their perspective, they have long-term agreements with Universal, with studios, as to having a window of time before these big releases go from, they play in the theater for so long and then they're released on home video. And there's these long negotiations for what that looks like and all sorts of how many screens. I mean, it's very complex negotiations for all of this. And then, I guess a month back, 6 weeks back, when Universal was making their plans to release Trolls 2 directly to video and skip theaters, they sent a letter to AMC theaters where they said, because of these unusual times, we're going to put some of these movies direct onto VOD. And that's what they told the theater that. And so suddenly the CEO comes out and says, when theaters reopen, we're going to keep doing this. That's a little bit of the context, the backstory of why they're angry about this. So people ask me, what is VOD? VOD is video on demand, releasing it straight to home video, as opposed to in theaters, straight to streaming. That's what VOD is these days. And so that's the context of AMC having such a sharp, sudden response where it's like instantly, as soon as the day that the CEO of Universal makes these statements, AMC has a quick response. It's because from their perspective, you guys just violated good faith negotiations. You guys violated what you just said. And so AMC publicly stated, we will not be showing any Universal movies moving forward. That's F9. That's Jurassic World 3. I mean, that's like, these are billion-dollar club movies. These are safe bets. These are big theatrical films. These are like, those are the types of movies that people go out to the theaters to see. They're designed for it. Like, I'm way more excited to watch a Fast and Furious movie in the theater than I am with a crowd of people pumped up than I am sitting at my home.
Mm-hmm.
And AMC says they're out, and they elaborate a little bit. This isn't like directly towards Universal. Any studio that makes statements like this, that violates our long-term negotiations and doesn't respect the window, is out. So that's kind of trying to give kind of the broader picture of where they're coming from. The other broad picture in this that makes it weird, we were talking about just 2 weeks ago, AMC's on the verge of going bankrupt. What negotiating do they have to make a statement like this?
Yeah. And actually, prior to that, when Universal announced that Trolls was going to open on VOD, they're like, this is an utter betrayal and we won't forget this. It's like, I see both sides of it, but I think in this case, AMC's reaction is just it's such a gross overreaction. Like, really? You're not going to show F9, Minions, Jurassic World? Like, outside of Disney, Universal arguably has the biggest money makers. So you're just going to say, nope, screw that. We're going to be petty, and we're not going to play whatever game you're making us play because you decide to release some movies on VOD, which is, studios do that anyway. Why is that? Like, it's not like they're saying we're going to scrap the theatrical experience altogether. Like, it's just absolutely petty and stupid. Now, I understand that they're trying to protect the theatrical experience, and like, and basically stay in business. But like, to make these comments right when you're on the verge of bankruptcy just shows everything wrong about the leadership in your company, in my opinion. I'll
kind of play a little bit of the other side to it, of the NBC Universal CEO making statements like that publicly. That's not wise. Like that. I mean, it's one of those, as much as you want to be like, AMC, what are you thinking? You also have to be like, Universal, like, what are you thinking making comments like that, to where they do have long-term negotiations they're very much like, hey, we're in a position of power. We're going to keep doing this. And they said it publicly.
I don't know if I took it like that, though. Like, it just felt like they were just out of like a shareholders meeting. They were just after like a budgetary financing meeting, and they just spoke to the Wall Street Journal, which is like a monetary, magazine or like, news source. So it's like, why should they not say that? Right? Like, it's just, they're just talking about releasing some movies on VOD while still preserving the theatrical experience for the movies that it really matters. Like, you're going to tell me that that AMC is not going to play Halloween Kills when theaters opens back up during October? Really? Like, come on, guys.
Right. I mean, that's where that's one of these stories. I guess that's the other side of the story, where I don't really believe this is fully going to play out this way.
No,
I mean, they're gonna figure something out. But when you think through the way, like, how complex these negotiations are, and there's certain key things in the relationship between movie theaters and production companies, that there's a couple things in there that are just kind of like those sacred relationships. Like, the deal breaks on this thing, and there's constantly, going all the way back since home video came about, this debate over that window of time. Like, when I was growing up, movies didn't come out for rental for 9 months. It was 9 months.
Yeah.
And when they came out for rental, to buy a copy of the movie, it cost $100. So Blockbuster would get a bunch of copies, but if you wanted to buy a copy, it was $100. Because they didn't want you to be able to buy the movie yet. And then rental companies or rental places got their window. And then at a year mark, then you could buy the movie for $30. So they cost the same amount back then as they do today, with all the inflation, everything else has happened. And the they just keep shrinking that down to it's more and more towards home based, more and more towards home based. And so the theater experience keeps getting shrunk. And that's one of those things that people, mini rabbit trail here. A lot of times people talk about, biggest box office of all time. And they want to talk about, Endgame might be the top one, but ticket sales, Gone with the Wind has sold more tickets. Well, if you look at, and when what you have to think about though, is that Gone with the Wind, for its first 40 years of existence, you could only see it in the theater or like once per year on television. You couldn't have a home copy of it. And so this home video discussion, it's this very movie theaters are battling this for like what to do with this because they just see the end of their extinction. So then when Universal goes, hey, we found a way to make more money, we can actually make more money. And so kind of they make this statement just kind of casually coming out of a meeting to the Wall Street Journal. It's not meant to be this overthought press release as to what Universal is going to do in the future. It is an off-the-cuff statement, most likely. But at the same time, it's an off-the-cuff statement that ties to something that's an extreme insecurity of movie theaters.
Well, that's the thing. It's like AMC is just showing how insecure they are about this whole thing. I mean, it's like how it's just like a bad relationship where someone's putting all of their insecurities on the other party, and it's not going to end well.
No.
I wonder how this affects people with A-list going forward. Like if this thing does happen for like the rest of the year, I bet they lose a lot of A-list subscribers and everyone switches over to like Regal or whatever, which actually sucks for us out here because most of the theater chains in like Southern California where I am are AMC. Yeah. I mean, like thankfully I have a Regal nearby me, but like AMC is the big AMC has a theater on Universal City Walk.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
You just not going to show Universal's movies outside of their theme park and like near the studios? Like they really did not think this through when they made that statement.
And so like I had some people talking about this because I'm friends with a lot of people in the horror community. So since Halloween is part of Universal, that's the big movie for this huge group of people. So there's a big discussion. Yeah. Is this going to hurt Halloween? And some others like, no, there's other movie theater chains. And that's where I responded back like, there's like major player cities that are dominated by AMC. There's only 2 AMC theaters in Austin, or 3 now. Another one just opened. There's only 3 in Austin. So I'm totally unaffected by this announcement. But like when I went to go visit you in LA, there is literally an AMC theater everywhere. And literally when you walk into Universal Studios, the theme park, the first thing you see is an AMC theaters. Like it's right there in front of you. And so, I mean, there's markets that absolutely, this is a big deal for the city of LA, for Burbank, for Hollywood, trying to see movies being made by Hollywood. That's what gets really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think this is actually going to happen. No. It's just really stupid because you know what Universal could do? They could just like scrap the AMC name, scrap the theater, and just make it their own theater, right? And then they can just show movies there. It can be Universal's movies. Maybe they strike deals with other companies. And then because of how, petulant AMC is kind of like acting, they could just like, eliminate them altogether by saying, well, screw you. We're going to have this be our own Universal Cinema and we're going to play our movies here and also decide to maybe strike deals with other studios as well. I don't know. And the question is like, what are other studios going to decide to do this as well? No. Like I understand Universal has been the big one to like make, the move to VOD and whatnot, but like, I don't know. Again, I understand like the theaters trying to protect their like, stay alive basically during these like difficult times and like being on the verge of bankruptcy definitely makes them seem more desperate. But like, this is not the response, right? Like you just, let's be honest. I think that the theater chains need the studios more than the studios need the theater chains. Right. If I'm like realistically.
Right. Well, I mean, theaters, they only have one source of material to show. The studios. Yeah. And studios have countless options, revenue streams. The demand for new movies is not going to go away. That like people always want that. Yeah. And they'll find a way to watch that. and there's demand for a theater experience, but that's one of many
Sure.
ways that we consume. And so theaters are much more in a vulnerable position. And so AMC making such a bold statement. I mean, even last week, as I was putting together my video on 5 perfect movies and thinking through that, the number of potential options that were Universal. I mean, they really are massive powerhouse that you're insane to like pick a fight with them that you can't win.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think the last thing I'll say about this is that crap, I had it, man. I just lost it. It had to do with like okay, it is a symbiotic relationship, obviously, and like the studios need to get their films in front of as many people as possible, and they can't possibly just like build theater chains across the country. But from AMC's perspective, like the studios have really made it difficult on them. Like they've strangled. It's why ticket prices have gone up. It's why like the price of concessions have gone up, because that's how they make their money, right? Because of the studios are kind of like taking a larger cut. And I guess the thing is like that whenever they've done that, the theaters have always agreed to that. But now it's like when the theaters are in a difficult spot, it seems like the studios are just abandoning them.
That's the side to it that I see.
Yeah, and it's like I understand that mentality, but like being in a position where they are, and they definitely don't have the upper hand in this instance, and just making really just wild, outrageous remarks like that's not only going to that's going to hurt them in the long run. It's not good.
Right.
So it's like they got to figure a better approach out to this instead of just being ticked off because they're not treating you the way you treated them.
Yeah. Right. And hopefully they can resolve this behind the scenes. Okay, real quick, I had something that came up actually this morning that I didn't put in my show notes, but I wanted to make sure that we talked about this. I'm almost certainly going to mispronounce his name, but it's kind of announced this morning that Irrfan Khan passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know if I pronounced his name right? Or do you
I think that's pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah, if not right. Yeah.
So he was in Jurassic World. That's probably the broadest thing from my audience that you would be aware of. The kind of the owner guy that flew the helicopter, and he was also Slumdog Millionaire, Bollywood. He was in his early 50s, and I believe he died of cancer. And so, of course, that's always a tragedy. And just kind of want to pause real quick to make sure that that was brought up. It's something that's literally broke this morning since I messaged you last night about topics for the day. So, have you seen much of his work beyond?
No, I haven't. Sadly, like Bollywood is a area or like a genre of film that I haven't really gotten the chance to delve into too much. But like from my understanding, he was like one of the best, like well-regarded actors to come out of Bollywood. Hence why he made the crossover into international cinema.
Right.
I was actually just watching like the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and like he was in the first one. So like I remember him from that. It's like I remember him from small more international driven films, but obviously his legacy lives on throughout his Bollywood filmography.
Right.
That's really like where you can get a nice taste of his work.
Yeah, and so for me, once again, like I've only seen kind of the big mainstream stuff he's done with Hollywood and Bollywood. Something I keep meaning to watch, Three Idiots, while I'm in quarantine, and people keep asking me about it. I keep meaning to. It just hasn't quite happened yet. But wanted to pause for a little bit and pay a little bit of tribute to him.
Oh yeah, he was. People in the chat are saying he was Pi. He was the adult version of Pi in Life of Pi.
Okay,
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Moving along to our next subject of the day. The Oscars put out an announcement yesterday with a couple of big important things. One of them is a temporary change and one of them is a long-term one. First big change is that they said that for this year only, they're going to allow streaming services to be considered for the Oscars. And I'll elaborate on that in just a second. Second one is that they're combining sound editing and sound mixing into a single category. And so that's just, instead of having two kind of things where we talk about sound, there's just one. So diving into that first one a little bit, on when it says that they're going to allow movies from streaming to be considered for Best Picture, you might immediately say, wait a minute, what about Roma? What about The Irishman? So basically, to be eligible for the Oscars, My understanding is that you need to play in a certain number of theaters in New York, in LA, for like 2 weeks. You have to actually show in a theater, those two cities, for a certain amount of time to be eligible. You have to have an actual theatrical release, and it's really specific the way it works. So you can't just like show it to your mom and pop in some random theater in Boulder, Colorado, and be like, hey, look, my mom saw it in the theaters, so it's eligible.
Yeah.
And the Oscars, the Academy have stuck to this, even as of recently, where we're getting a lot more kind of prestige level filmmakers putting out content on streaming services. But this year, and they specified in the announcement, for this year only, we're going to open that up and streaming movies are eligible. From my perspective, in the year 2020, it just sounds a bit like the Academy's behind the times. And if you're going to make an exception for 1 year, you're kind of acknowledging times are changing. And so it just seems like they're delaying the inevitable, as opposed to really solving whatever their fear is. I'm not quite sure exactly what their fear is on it has to be a theatrical release. So I'm not quite sure what that is, or if it's just trying to narrow down the selection, but it seems like this is a direction, of course, they should be moving in light of all the conversations that we're having. And even the one that we just literally had about Universal being like, yeah, I mean, it looks like we're just going straight to video with some of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, for this year, I get it. I totally understand. I think that it was kind of a no-brainer that was going to happen. I get what you're saying, but I also think that like if a film wants to be eligible for the Academy Awards, it should screen in, theaters. It should have to do that because that's how you truly, in my opinion, that's how you're truly able to appreciate the craft. It's how you're truly able to appreciate the sound, for instance, the picture quality. You get, you're not distracted all the time by like whatever's going on around you. It's just like you sitting there and focusing on a film. So like, I think it should be required that like films have to screen, and it's only 2 weeks. Like it's not like it's asking for the world. Like, and if anything, it'll introduce like more people to your movie who like enjoy going to the film, or like maybe just walked up to the theater and like didn't even know your movie was playing, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh wow, that sounds interesting, let me go check that out. So I don't know. Yeah, I get it, but I also think that like there is something important about seeing like films that are honored for like the highest award they can possibly achieve. Like there is something about that's like, well, they should be seen in a theater because that's how they were designed to be seen. So like it makes sense for an award ceremony that would be one of their requirements. And so I don't necessarily think they're behind the curve,
When the requirements are it's literally just 2 cities and that it's 2 weeks and all you have to do is meet these technical requirements to be eligible for it, that's where it starts to get weird for me. Because it's like, okay, yeah, of course we're going to let in The Irishman that, even Scorsese's making pretty clear. This movie's meant to be seen on the big screen, but it's streaming because they're the ones that gave him money to do it. But how many people actually had the ability to see that one on the big screen outside of 2 cities? And that's where I go, okay, if we're saying that do we need to like fully embrace that? Do they really need to go on and say that this movie needs to show in 500 theaters in at least 10 markets? Something like that, to where it's a legitimate version of that takes place where people actually can go see the movie, as opposed to, yeah, I mean, if you're in the 2 most prominent cities in the United States, you can see these prestige films on the big screen. Otherwise, sure. It's not. I think that's to where like it's hard for me in Central Texas to fully buy into that one, because it's like, yeah, well, some of these ones I can't. And so should we just say Netflix movies are out because they're only meeting the technical requirements? Well, then you're kicking out Roma, right. You're kicking out The Irishman. That's where to me it's like there's a tension there that I don't think has been figured out.
Right, and I definitely understand that. I think some of them. I was when I still lived in Maryland, I was really close to DC. I was able to go see a lot of those films in the independent theaters there. So it's like you're right. You do have to live like in a metropolitan area. But I will say this: the majority of the voting body for the Academy is in New York and LA. And that's ultimately what it's about. Unfortunately, it's like, while we want everyone to see these movies, for voting purposes, it is the people who make up the Academy that are the ones that matter ultimately when it comes to these requirements. So it's like, it's important to see these films in a theater, but like when your Academy voting body is in New York and LA, that's where it matters most, that you have your films open for. So that's probably the only reason I can think of why it's not like a stricter requirement to be across the country, you know? Yeah. Well, and then plus, like, for some of these streaming services, it's a lot harder to get their films into theaters, like in every single state or stuff like that, because the theater chains, once again, as we were talking about, are all about like profits and making money and whatnot. And when they're already being like, when they already have a stranglehold on them by the major studio system, it's harder for them to allow these smaller movies to go in when they're not the ones that are bringing in as much money, and they're almost like losing money on them, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's even, I mean, there have been many times where some of these smaller movies have gotten little releases around me, and I head out to the theater thinking, oh, it's only playing in this one theater. It'll probably do pretty. Nope. There's nobody there.
Yeah.
I mean, very much the market these days for who goes to the movie theaters. It is that top percent of large films are what get the tickets. But I think some of that's all to where it feels there's all these different factors that kind of play into it, to where when you have the politics of, can you even get your movie shown in a theater? We all know that we are getting prestige stuff on Netflix. That's where I go, is there a way that they need to reevaluate this? Is there a way to I don't even know what I'm proposing right now, but, you know, cut a deal with the theaters that once movies are nominated for Best Picture, that they get that playing in theaters in January and February.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's some other version to it, but in my mind, when you start really seeing Scorsese making his way to Netflix, and they're the ones that are funding his stuff, and and they're just doing kind of these, they're having to cut deals just so it meets minimum requirements. That's where I go, okay, we shouldn't be having movies meeting the bare minimum to qualify. We need to really think through what we're talking about with movies that obviously are kind of at that prestige level to be considered. The other one on here,
that's probably true.
Was that they're taking sound editing and mixing and combining them into one. I think I know the difference between the two, but I'm not entirely sure. To the average person, sound is sound, and seems pretty specific to have two different categories for sound mixing. So the idea of taking sound mixing and sound editing, is that sound editing would be the actual coming up with the sounds itself, I believe, and the mixing is the literal mix. Would that be your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, it's like mixing in the audio with the rest of the picture, and then editing is like splicing up the audio to lay it on the track, and then also, you're right, coming up with the sounds, and finding them and you know, working with Foley and stuff like that. So it's like I understand people's perception where it's just like, it's like sound is sound, but like they're two very different jobs, and they both deserve to be recognized, in my opinion, because they both do very different things. So while I get it from like a show standpoint, it's kind of unfair to those who have worked really hard on like a movie, like, say, I don't know, Ford v Ferrari, like, and you clearly have two incredibly talented sound teams there who did two very different things, and should be like acknowledged for doing different things, not just, well, here's the sound award, you know?
Yeah.
So, because I mean, we honor like every other like respective category. Like, we honor musical score and like a best original song. We honor you know, costume design and the makeup and hairstyling, where it's like, well, we could combine those into one category and just make, I don't know, whatever they would want to call it. So it's like, while I understand, I also just think it's unfair to like point out, single out sound, you know, and just be like, well, you don't deserve to have your two respective categories recognized.
And I think where it gets tricky is that we recognize a lot of things, but then there's things we don't recognize, like stunt work. People literally die doing that work, and it's not recognized.
Yeah.
And so then when you go, we don't recognize these guys that clearly there's an art to it. They're having to figure out how to do incredible things with their life on the line. But we're also going to distinguish between the guy stepping on the glass and the guy mixing the glass into the sound of the movie. And it seems like, wait a minute. I mean, I guess maybe the guy stepping on the glass could get some in his foot, but literally this guy jumped off a building. And every 3 months we hear a story about a stunt woman dying. Even Deadpool 2 had a lady died making that movie. And I think that's a little bit more where we, I don't know if it's a fairness argument, but that's the one to me where I can balance it out and be like, okay, this thing is unfair. There's like, I think best original song for the most part is a very weird category that gets a disproportionately large amount of time for the ceremony. And then that's where you start reevaluating. Should we have some of these? Do they need to rethink a little bit how they do a little bit of this? But that's more what I'd be coming from of like, there's motion capture doesn't seem to be properly recognized. There's certain things like where it's like these newer technologies that they haven't figured out what exactly to do with it yet. And then at the same time, once again, sound is split in two. And
I get it when you say that. Yeah.
But back also to your point of like, those are two different, it's sound, but it's entirely different skill sets and things that you're doing. But I mean, I think that's where a lot of these categories came about decades ago, and the whole industry is totally different. The process of making movies is totally different, and need to reevaluate some of that.
Right. I think for me, if they're going to combine the sound categories, then they need to add like a stunt performance category. Yeah. Like I regardless of whether they combine the two sound categories or not, it's absolutely ridiculous that they have not made that a category, especially because it's like, it's not anything new. It's just like, we're really starting to appreciate it now because of how insane the choreography and the work is. But like, that thing's been around for ages, and it's really been a huge part of what makes movies. So it's like, yes, that should absolutely be recognized. Then the other one, like with motion capture, I think if an actor gives like as good of a motion capture performance as Andy Serkis did in War for the Planet of the Apes, they should be considered for a Best Actor nomination, because that is literally them. Like, it is no different than putting on makeup. So there are a few barriers that the Academy definitely has to get over and get with the times,
So moving along, we got a couple super chats come in. Oliver said, "Hey, this is probably the best video I could have woken up to today. Love these podcasts." Well, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. And these are actually a lot of fun to do, especially now that they're live and we can interact back and forth with the chat section and everything like that. It becomes kind of this weekly deal where we're all kind of in quarantine and we're just sitting around talking about movies, what interests us and everything kind of going on in the world, which is fun. So they're fun for me. Real quick little topic. They announced yesterday that Now You See Me 3 is in production. Or not in production, is in development. Development means they're working on the script behind the scenes, hiring people for it. In production means you're filming. Post-production means that you're editing, special effects, sound, stuff like that. So they announced that it is in development. They are planning on doing Now You See Me 3. Fun fact, before Sean Chandler Talks About, I posted a bunch of reviews on, not a bunch, some reviews on the same exact YouTube channel. One of those being Now You See Me, where a buddy of mine got me into the press screening for it. And so I was like, hey, I might as well just shoot a review for this. So if you want to see prototype Sean Chandler movie review, you can see Now You See Me, the original one. I never actually watched the second one, so I didn't like the first one that much. I didn't really dislike it. It just kind of was. I thought it was a little bit too fantastical for what could have been a really interesting idea of what if magicians were trying to do heists using actual magician tricks rather than, no, that's just magic. Like, you can't do that. So that's where it kind of lost me a little bit. But never saw the second one. I've heard about this one because my wife goes, "Did you hear about Now You See Me 3? They're doing a third one." I was like, "Did you like the first one?" "Oh, no, not really." "Did you see the second one?" "No." "So why are you getting all excited about the third?" I don't understand what that was. Anyway, what do you think about the Now You See Me movies and this announcement?
I love the first one. I think it's very... not very, but I think it's underrated for sure. I get the criticisms of it, but it's just such a fun movie and such like a unique and interesting idea, and the cast is great. I never saw the second one.
And that's the weird
Weirdly
thing.
enough, even though yeah.
That it's one of those movies that falls into that category, because I'm probably more negative on the first one than you were, but it wasn't like I didn't actively dislike it or anything, but neither one of us saw the second one. That's where I'm interested that whatever that thing is, there was a disconnect where it was like, that was a cool one-time experience, but do I need a second? I didn't even watch the second one. That's weird. That's so specific to both of us. And I think a lot of people fall in that category. That's where I'm also like, a third one. Who saw the second one?
Yeah, it's like what are we? It's like, what, really? You're going forward with the third one? I mean, sure. I don't know. I heard the second one wasn't very good, even by like standards of the first one. So like, and I don't remember who did the second one. Was it like John M. Chu, or was it I don't know who it was, but like, yeah. Anyways, I love the first one. Never saw the second one. Third one, I don't know what the story is going to be, so maybe. But like, I guess I'm one of the people who's just like perfectly content.
John M.
Just
Chu.
the first one. Yeah. And that was before he hit like his stride with Crazy Rich Asians. I've just never been a big fan of his. He's just not that great. I mean, like, he can do some visually interesting things, but he's just his stuff is very much rooted in like camp and cheese, and I just can't. It just gets to be too much at times. But yeah, I don't know. Third one, we'll see. I'm not like against it, but I'm also like not jumping out of my chair for it. And this is coming from someone who loves the first one. So
yeah, it just seemed so out of blue. Of the things to announce Tuesday, Now You See Me 3? Okay, interesting enough. All right, got a super chat real quick from Azim the Dreamer Reviews. Hey guys, I've always wondered, what sort of value do you think our channels as reviewers bring to the table? Filmmakers ultimately have the hardest job. So the question is, what is the value of movie critics in movie discussion? And I like, from my perspective, what I've always been about is I'm just interested in having the conversations that I'm either having in real life or the conversations I wanted to have in real life and bring them to the internet. It's not about, am I adding a bunch to the world of film in any sort of like, arrogant fashion like that. I just sit around talking movies with people. This is the stuff I'm interested in. When I had interns, I'd sit them down in a corner and be like, you guys, what's your favorite John Williams score? And they're like, who's John Williams? Haven't you guys seen the Harry Potter movies? Yeah. That's him. And like that's the stuff I've always done. And I just bringing that passion, that love to the internet. And I happen to be on Rotten Tomatoes now, but that's because someone applied for me and I got accepted, which is awesome. It's amazing. But from my perspective, I perceive of myself not as a film critic in deep analysis or anything like that. I'm just a fanboy with an audience. That's my perspective on what kind of my place is. What we talked about recently, like 30 seconds ago on here. This is just about like having the conversations we want to have. And we read all these announcements. We had some arguments on Twitter, but actually having a conversation about it. How about you? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think that it's a symbiotic relate, and I'm not talking about myself, but I'm talking about film criticism and filmmaking in general. It is a symbiotic relationship where both art forms are valid and important in their own right. Obviously, the filmmakers are the people making the movies, but when it comes to film historians, film critics, they're about the preservation of culture and bringing, thoughtful analysis to pieces of art and allowing us to view it in a way that we haven't thought of before. Some of the best filmmakers love film critics, and they love like delving into movies to explore their importance and whatnot. And so while it's really easy to write off criticism as just like, well, you're just making statements about like movies and like you're not actually making the movies. The good critics, they're the people who really make the difference in their thoughtful approach to what they're saying. And it's all about culture. It's all about writing about how it pertains to the world around us, how certain films affect certain groups of people, giving different groups of people a voice and whatnot. It's important, and I think it doesn't I think it gets overlooked quite a bit. Good film critique, really good film critique is powerful and important, and it can be life changing. It can change the way you view a movie. So it and that's where it kind of gets into the fact where it's like, oh, you have just a bunch of people saying like, oh yeah, that movie was really good. That's not film criticism. That's just like people talking, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like when you're looking at actual like film critics and people who like explore and research and preserve these works for like a living, and they do it for years, like that's what makes the difference. And it helps inform the filmmakers as to like what people are interested in, and how they can tailor their filmmaking style and their voice to the world around them.
So a really interesting one on even that kind of idea, they're just practical value to filmmakers. So the Russo brothers were on Screen Junkies like 5 years ago, and they did a guest like commentary reaction to the Captain America Winter Soldier Honest trailer. And in it, the Russo brothers said, yeah, we'd seen many of the Honest trailers before we made Winter Soldier, because it was funny, and we came from a comedy background doing TV, and so we just loved that form of criticism. And as we were making the Winter Soldier, we were actively thinking, how do we honest trailer proof this movie? And so that's, you think honest trailers, it's film criticism, comedy, it's meant to entertain, but at its core, they're trying to actually make real observations about the contrivances and things inside of films. Likewise, like with pitch meetings recently, there's a lot of stuff in Ryan George's pitch meetings where he's informing you about all of the corners that filmmakers cut. That's like how he sets up his jokes and everything, is to point out all this stuff. And there's value to that, to kind of call it out. And it's a way for the average Joe to be informed a little bit about some of these things. And I think that there is a lot of value in that. And that, stuff like I put out a video yesterday on movies that audiences loves and critics hated. You need the critics to be able to call out, Bayformers crap. That it entertained people is totally fine. But there has to be a counterbalance to like him, pandering to the lowest common denominator, but it makes $1 billion. Age of Extinction. Wow. I mean, maybe I'm even biased towards that movie because they filmed all the stuff at Mark Wahlberg's house was filmed about 8 miles that way. And it's not a good movie. It's a very bad film, but it made over $1 billion. And so criticism is kind of a pushback to be like, no, there are movies that can get great reviews and make $3 billion. Endgame did it. Even Avatar got great reviews. Like there's movies that can do it. And then you have movies that, and I think there is a lot of value in all of that. Real quick, I wanted to touch on, we got more. Sorry. You got one more?
No, yeah. But before we move on, something was just brought to my attention. So Regal Cinemas has actually sided with AMC against Universal Pictures, stating that we will not be showing movies that fail to respect the theatrical windows, as it does not make any economic sense for us. So
the war has begun.
Better and better.
Let's see. It's how to make a Yoda joke, Clone Wars Yoda joke out of that one. I don't know how to do it. But the Civil War has begun amongst Universal and theater chains. All right, real quick. I don't want to linger on this too long, but this last week was announced that Mission Impossible 1 and 2, or 7 and 8, have been delayed like 3 months. They were supposed to come out summer 21 and 22. They've been pushed back to like November 21 and 22. If you don't know, they announced it over a year ago. Chris McQuarrie's returning, and he's doing the next 2 Mission Impossible movies back to back, probably because they want to finish out the series with Tom Cruise before he hits 60. And that's not a joke. That's a legitimate thought. It's also kind of funny. Uncharted moved forward a couple months to July 2021. And then Spider-Man 3, actually all the Spider-Man 3 and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse got new release dates, dropping in November 2021, actually on the date that Doctor Strange was originally scheduled for. So like 2 hours after this was announced, then Doctor Strange moved once again. Do you have any new thoughts on any of this? We talk about dates moving every single week.
Yeah.
So I don't have much to say.
Right. No, I mean, like, obviously, Spider-Man 3 was never going to open like 2 weeks after Venom 2. That's just
Yeah.
preposterous. So, yeah, the fact that it moved to Doctor Strange's date and like Doctor Strange moved to like whatever, and it's a little bit of a reshuffling that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah, I don't really have much else to add on it. It just, yeah,
And I'll
makes
just kind of
sense.
repeat what I say every week for anyone that's just tuning in for the first time today. But basically, what I've been saying ever since all this started is that there's just such a large trickle down effect of all of this that pretty much every movie date is going to shuffle. There will be a couple of exceptions here and there. But if you take 3 months worth of movies and you say they can't come out when they're supposed to, and we just have to shuffle them back, you can't just release twice as many movies in the fall of 2020 as you would have otherwise. First off, you just can't do that. Can't put that many movies in the theaters, and then every theater still wants the best release date, and so then it just kind of turns into this kind of big shuffle. And then add to that movies that are in production right now aren't in production. Movies in post production, certain ones they can't finish, or like Minions 2. They
Hmm.
had to shut down production because of that. And so there's just a big trickle down to where some people are like, do they really think that movie theaters aren't going to be back up and running in late 2021? No, that's not what it is. It's this reshuffling of everything to try and get the best release date for everyone. That's kind of what you're seeing with all of this. And it's not going to stop. They're going to keep I would take even every date. I'm not even saying the dates because I don't think they're going to stick. I don't know which ones. I don't know, but like it's going to keep shuffling. And even now, like you have two major theater chains saying we're not going to put out Universal Pictures films anymore,
Hmm.
and you
Hmm.
go, I don't know. I doubt that'll play out, but
Yeah.
that has big ramifications. If theaters aren't being taken up with, if you don't have to worry about Halloween's release date anymore, maybe we could put Venom there again.
Yeah, right.
It's
That's true.
all this weird stuff that's the trickle down of this insane time that we're in right now. But I don't have any specifics beyond kind of my general. Just assume
Yeah.
everything's going to change is my general
Yeah.
policy.
Yeah.
Got a super chat from Majestic Demon. I went out and bought 1917 yesterday, watched it when I got home, and I'm still picking up the pieces of my mind that were blown away by that film. It's a good one. It's a. It was your favorite of last year, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not only my favorite of last year. I think you can make an argument that it's the best war film ever made. So
I think it was my
I love
number
it.
two of
Absolutely
last
love it.
year, but if I rewatch that one in Ford v Ferrari, it could be number one. I mean, just pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Um, Pretty incredible what they were able to do with that film. Real quick, super chat from Kevin Hernandez. Trolls World Tour is bad. I hate it. I haven't seen it. I just wasn't interested. A
Yeah.
lot of people are like, hey, there's a new Trolls movie. You could rent that one and watch it and review it. And I was like, I'm just not interested in paying $20 to watch a movie at home. I'm not interested in really watching anyway. So that's why I didn't get it. Like if they had a better option to where I could buy it or something, maybe I would. But it's also one I'm not like crazy about. Hey kids, here, watch this movie about farting trolls. They fart rainbows. It's
Yeah.
cute.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
And the first one, I mean, with like the goblins and stuff were eating the trolls. I mean, it was really pretty dark on some of the stuff with that movie that I just wasn't necessarily the thing for me. Real quick, another super chat on here. Max Bolton says each Star Wars movie with a grade. I'm not quite sure what you're asking. If you want me to give a letter grade to each Star Wars movie, I've reviewed all of them on my channel. I did that last fall leading up to Rise of Skywalker. And so you can check out my grades on all of them. And I also have rankings that kind of give me how they kind of fall for me. I guess we'll
Yeah.
throw this one over to you, Griffin. What's your spectrum on these ones? What's your bottom Star Wars movie and what grade do you give it?
Uh, what do we? Is that a real question?
That's to you real quick. Like what, like is it still Rise of Skywalker? Is that what you're on is your worst?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 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 It was bad. I thought. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were making a joke. That's why.
I
Yeah.
sort of am. I'm
No.
trying to
Yeah.
get you to
Rise.
set up a controversy on the
Right.
podcast
Right.
here.
Yeah. 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 No. Yeah. Rise of Skywalker,
That's your worst.
easily
And
the worst.
how bad
That's
is it on that letter score?
probably like a probably like a D plus.
D plus. I think mine at worst is
I think it's
I
terrible.
think mine was Attack of the Clones, and I had it a C. I think is C.
Yeah.
It's got good
Yeah.
sequences,
Yeah.
but I rewatched it last week, and I mean, the acting is atrocious, the dialogue is atrocious, and I don't think it has a plot. But there's still some Star Wars magic in it.
It still feels more like Star Wars to me than Rise of Skywalker. Let's put it that way.
So moving along, I want to do a little quick editorial here. Little discussion. The movie Extraction came out last week, and we talked about it on the podcast. You gave it a raving review, got me pumped for it.
Yeah.
And I'm the target audience. I'm absolutely the target audience for that one. And I saw it. I stayed up till 2 a.m. to watch it right when it debuted. I never do that. I think it's the only time I've done it with a Netflix film. And I really dug it. And maybe I had some recency bias, maybe, I don't know. But, I went with an A- on it. Because, for me, as an action movie, it had that urgency, the momentum, great everything, cool performances. And I like the way it treated kind of side characters and giving them a little bit of, like, random henchmen. Normally in these movies, you don't know anything about them. They're just evil, mean dudes. And these ones, it gave you their different perspective. And then the perspective on the internet, however, has been way more mixed than I was expecting.
Yeah, right?
I was
weird.
Really surprised, not just by how many and the who's, the specific people that were like, oh, sure, it was great action, but it's just a hollow movie with nothing to say and nothing to do. And you don't care about anyone or anything that happened. It's just visual noise. I was like, what? I was really surprised by how many people said that. And I got into a bunch of discussions with people, and I made some tweets about this, to where it's like, I'm actively confused. It feels to me, over the last decade, there's this huge category of people that they will rave about The Raid, Fury Road, and John Wick, and maybe even Taken thrown in the mix there. In every other action movie that's just good, they call it bad. And it seems like a lot of people kind of fall into that category. If you look at, and other people are like, yeah, well, comic book movies are action movies. And so, tons of people give positive reviews to action movies. Like, no. There's a difference between an action movie as it was defined for decades and modern, epic, mega blockbuster comic book movies. Like there are different types of stories, different types of material. We're talking about an action movie, throw in martial arts, but you throw in guys with guns. But what we're talking about when you say action movie versus Endgame. And I just look at it, and every time one of these movies comes out, that I know I'm going to be a little bit, I'm the target audience, so I'll be softer on some of these ones. An example, in case where you went real negative on it, Gemini Man. One that I saw it and I went, okay, yeah, definitely feels dated. Feels like this is a concept that should have been made in the year 2002. And the script was just lying there. But, I had fun with it. I'm the target audience. And a lot more people just ravage on it, kind of like, worst of the year. And it's like, I don't even know what you're saying right now. And then, or it's ones like this, where it's like a movie that some of us are saying is great, and a bunch of people just, it's hollow. There's nothing to it. So I just want to throw that one out there too. You wouldn't be in the category of me that's just a total sucker for the action genre. Do you have any perspective on this one? Do you see kind of this pattern that I'm seeing, where it seems like the action movie specifically is become niche? It's become niche to where there's literally like 5 movies, 1 per year maybe, that people dig, and then everything else is just for the fans.
Yeah, I don't entirely understand how I guess you can say that John Wick, the first one at least, has more of an emotional core to it than Extraction, because of the relationship with his dog and his wife and all of that. And it's like, it's not a lot, but it's enough to really just get the job done. Yeah. But the other two don't necessarily have that. I mean, they explore it, no more than the emotional stuff that's explored in Extraction, which I actually don't think gets enough credit. I think there's an interesting sort of commentary on there on role models. And people, father figures and people you look up to, that, for whatever reason, I guess it didn't convey to them, but from just a solely action film standpoint, I don't really understand why this movie is getting targeted more than the John Wick films.
Right. I think the John Wick films have a world building that makes them, it adds some spark to it.
Yeah.
And totally agree with that. But people are, I was talking with a guy, what in the script of The Raid adds that extra layer of depth to where we're praising The Raid, but this is this hollow movie. And, the person was like, well, the the Raid, it's about, these guys teaming up and you have to fight Mad Dog at the end. It was like, but everything you just said has a counterpart in Extraction. There's nothing like he like, I don't want to give too much away, but there's absolutely bonding for him. There's teaming up to overcome things. So it's not like Mad Dog has a backstory. It's not like these guys have much detail besides there's someone back home. So what in the script of the Raid is not hollow? What is the magic that is the Raid that it gets a pass? Or the one that's crazy to me is Taken, that people still love the movie Taken. And I don't know if that's just nostalgia that they haven't watched it in 10 years or whatever, and I love the movie Taken. I've seen it 30 times. I love that movie. But the movie starts off with Brian Mills buying a karaoke machine. And he's like, this karaoke machine, this is the one with the autoplay right. Yes, you've read the manual a bunch of times. Perfect. I'll take it. And it's overselling him buying a karaoke machine to show he's got a plan for everything. He thinks everything through. And then he goes to his daughter's birthday party and she wants to be a singer and the new stepfather gets her a pony and she's like 25 years old and she's supposed to be playing a 14-year-old or something. And it's like, you're just watching it being like, this is cringe. And then he just happens to be go on a mission as a bodyguard for a singer and gets her number so that it's just this stuff that's just goofy as can be.
It's goofy, but I still think I resonate more emotionally to that one than stuff in Extraction. Like I think the problem when it comes, just to play the other side, I think the problem when it comes to Extraction is like the relationship between the kid and Chris Hemsworth isn't really explored that much. Yeah. I mean, like the kid is basically like a therapist to Chris Hemsworth for like one scene, but like we never get more from the kid. And so like that was my big issue with the film is I wish that relationship actually felt stronger because it would have made the action and everything way better. And like, listen, I already like love the movie. So it's just like, I think it's stuff like that where it's like that relationship wasn't developed as enough as it needed to be for this film. That I can kind of see it from that point, but like, even still, when you take that into account, it's an excellent movie. Like it does what it sets out to do,
Yeah. And I guess my kind of point on some of that is that if you look at the action in Taken versus Extraction has much better action. Taken, easily. It's choppy, it's cut, it's chopped up. This basic plot just as simple, just as much of kind of a ticking clock. And one of these ones gets all sorts of praise. And one of them, it's a hollow movie. And that's why I just can't get a grasp on what that thing is that, what is it that there's some spark in Taken? There's some magic in it. There's some magic in The Raid. There's some magic in Fury Road, John Wick, to where people watch those ones and the plots are just as simple, but praised as can be. And Extraction seems to have not had whatever that magic is. And no one's really quite been able to articulate exactly the distinction. And the frustration for me as a fan of the genre, it just feels like there's no middle. There's only the greats and the bads. And, Screen Rant's running articles, why Extraction is no John Wick. Okay, well, so what? Like, okay, can we just talk about it?
Is it trying to be? Yeah,
Like, you don't have to follow up Spider-Man Far From Home. Why Spider-Man Far From Home is no Endgame, and it didn't make nearly as much money because of it. Well, that's because Endgame was not, like, everything isn't Endgame. Everything is not John Wick. And that's a very weird standard to use. So just wanted to rant about that a little bit in video form since
I get it. It's frustrating.
Want to repeat, Brandon Caterpillar had a super chat bringing this up. Regal reportedly has sided with Universal. Thoughts? We talked about this just a little bit. This might have been actually what you referenced. I just wanted to make sure to say his name on the screen. But as per our original topic, it looks like other theaters, they're probably going to start teaming up. And if Regal teams up with AMC, it would not surprise me at all if you start getting a whole bunch more people teaming up on this one in one direction to because that's their best tactic on all of this is to work together. And if all the studios are making big bold statements, or if all of the theaters are making a big bold statement together, they can battle any one studio. If all the studios team up together, it gets really interesting at that point in time. All right, let's close out the audio version of this one on here. Any recommendations for what people should check out this weekend?
Yeah, if you haven't, Justin Kurzel, who was the director of the version of Macbeth with Michael Fassbender, which no one saw, and I don't even know if everyone would like it, but it's an amazing adaptation of that, very much like a visual sort of just like mood poem. That sounds really pretentious, but and then he also did the Assassin's Creed adaptation, which I'm a big defender of, but the majority of people don't really like it. He has a new film out right now called The True History of the Kelly Gang, and it's really good. It's like this punk rock Australian Western about the most famous outlaw and celebrated figure in Australian history, and so that's available to watch on VOD if you're interested.
And along those same lines, you got to interview him. So if you also want to, you talked about why he thought Assassin's Creed failed. So if you guys saw the Assassin's Creed movie and were like, I don't know, I got a lot of problems with this, the director dives into that in this interview you did with him. It also talks about where he would have gone with the sequel. So it was about 10 minutes long. And you guys just having the interesting conversation that you always want to know on these movies. Like, what do they think? How did they analyze all of that? So over on FilmSpeak, Griffin's channel, you can check that out once it's done. If you're on the video version, we're going to keep on talking for a little bit longer and take your questions if you want to start throwing questions down into the chat on here. But thank you guys so much for listening over on the audio version. We'll be back next week to talk about whatever interesting is happening in the world of movies and keep talking movies too much. All right. Thank you guys here on YouTube for tuning in with us. I don't have anywhere to be for quite a while. Don't know how long Griffin has, but we can take your questions for a little bit. We got Super Chat. We'll try and answer every single one of those, and then we'll be going back and forth with people just in the main chat as well. Sure. Mega Red Assassin says, if you were a director, would you rather direct your dream film or win an Oscar for Best Picture of directed film, not your choice? For me, I would much rather just do my dream film rather than an Oscar picture. My nature, I'm not drawn at all to make like a prestige drama. I'm just not wired that way. I've got a couple stories in my mind that maybe could be in that sort of thing, some themes I'd like to explore. But when it comes to just the types of movies that by my nature I would be excited about making, it would be action. It would be, street level comic book movie. I could do a horror movie. I think that'd be a lot of fun. But like directing Roma does not interest me at all. Even directing like The Irishman does not appeal to me at all. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I feel like if you ask most filmmakers, they would say they'd rather direct their dream project. And if that dream project happens to get them to the Oscars, it means that much more. So, yeah, I would definitely rather do that too. Yeah.
So, and that's just I've actually had the thoughts before, like, is it weird, just like really slow and dull to direct some of these prestige films? Man, it's just because of my ADD, hyper caffeinated, drink too much soda personality. But like when I think about like Extraction, that seems like a fun movie to make. Tough, brutal, cut up arms and everything like that. But I just my first thought is like, when you see like Chris Hemsworth on set and he's like with a knife and then his stuntman's falling off of the building and he's filming. Yeah. That's like, I just like get kind of giddy thinking about that. Or like a horror movie where there's like blood spraying everywhere with the effects. But, a prestige film about like, these method actors, like, let me get into it. Okay. And then they go for it and they're crying. Like, I don't even know if I'd want to be around for that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it doesn't. There's definitely, you're exercising a different sort of like filmmaking muscle when you're doing those different genres. But yeah, I mean, Extraction, that looked like a blast to make. I mean, just look at the behind the scenes videos of Sam Hargrave doing that. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, they put out some cool clips about Extraction. All right, Iron Cap says this: thoughts on people criticizing the Russos for being bland corporate directors who can't make good movies outside the MCU. I mean, it's a pretty weird criticism to make right now because there's not. What's your pool of evidence since they've become big corporate directors? Yeah, I mean, okay, if you go back, me, you, and Dupree, and talk about their stuff from a long time ago before they were. Well, before anybody knew who they were, sure, you can criticize that. The stuff they did on television, Community, very interesting. Very interesting. Obviously, did some great stuff with their big corporate gigs. And now they've produced a couple movies. 21 Bridges, I'll give you that one's pretty bland. And then Extraction, I think anyone... I think part of my problem with some of the criticisms of it is maybe it's just a little bit too... It's a movie that its target audience, I think, is eating up. But a bunch of other people are watching it that aren't really the target audience. They don't really like actual straight-up action movies anymore. And
well,
as per our conversation. But.
Yeah, well, to counter that, my parents... Well, okay, so it was really funny. So my parents were watching through the John Wick trilogy for the first time. Had not seen it, absolutely loved it. And then when they finished, Extraction came out. So it was like the next logical progression.
Yeah.
They went to that. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
My girlfriend's parents both watched Extraction, absolutely loved it. So it's like the normal everyday people are really liking this movie. So it's I don't understand.
I'm trying to get a good vibe for it of like what are kind of normal people thinking. I had one of my good friends, he texted me, he watched it and he dug it. And I get, if someone gives it a 7 out of 10 and they're like, yeah, great action, a little bit hollow on story, that's not what I'm complaining about. That, and I should clarify that. I'm totally, I hear that and I go, sure, of course. That makes sense for a normal person's take on it. But it's the people that it's like, it's just a hollow movie. And maybe some of them aren't even giving their score on it. They're just making that statement. So it sounds like they're giving it a really negative review, or maybe they would go like a 7 out of 10. But, yeah, it's something that's been really kind of confusing to me. But the idea that the Russos can't make a good movie outside of the MCU, it's like, what, you don't have what's your sample case of this from the last 10 years?
Well, also, there is no sample case because they haven't directed any films outside of the MCU. And their next movie that they're directing, Cherry, is a very personal prestige picture, which looks like it's going to feature like an Oscar-worthy performance from Tom Holland. So that statement just, I reject that statement.
And I think some of it's people that don't even understand. They did not direct 21 Bridges. They didn't direct Extraction. It's their production company. And they're making movies they're excited about. And they're genre films. Like 21 Bridges is a little bit bland, but that's because it's a specific type of kind of this crime thriller with a little bit of action in it that isn't for everybody. And so then when you promote it using the Russo brothers' names, and so you have something that appealed to everybody, and then you go, all right, here's a little crime thriller with a small budget. Here's an action movie. They're not designed to have the same broad appeal as Endgame, but I mean, I think their target audiences are liking them. And to your point, there's some people outside of the more normal people are like, yeah, it's like quick moving, intense film that provides kind of this immersive experience. And I also wonder if it's, I wonder how much is even kind of an age thing. I think that like kind of younger generations, like even kind of your generation, they're being raised on action from big comic book movie blockbusters. More so than what I was raised on, which is Die Hard, Predator, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal. There's a very different way to kind of see some of these different things. But got a super chat from Max Bolton. What software are you using to stream? It's called Ecamm Live. Ecamm has a couple of different things. It's both what we used. It basically works with Skype, and I have kind of, there are two different programs. eCall Recorder is one I use when we record separate and pre-package this. I use Ecamm Recorder, and it records the individual tracks from Skype. And then this is Ecamm Live that allows me to put stuff up on the screen and makes it pretty easy. And I can put chats over it. And my computer doesn't handle it well. That's why the quality is not very good. That's all about the fact that I don't have a very good computer. Hopefully I'm going to be able to resolve that soon. But that's what we're using. I think I actually have an affiliate link for it. If you send me a message on Instagram, I can tell you where you can buy it. And I'll get like 15 cents or something like that. Making the big bucks. 15
cents. It's important.
Okay. Here we go. Here's one for me. Tommy Grace, Sean, are theaters in Texas reopening this Friday? Legally speaking, they can reopen this Friday, but it's not like movie theaters are reopening this Friday. That was just that's more of a political philosophy of freedom, and like you should let businesses make their own decisions. But there's no like it's not like everything's opening back up and people are going out to the movies or anything like that. So it's kind of a statement of if theaters want to do that, we will allow them to do that. But I don't know of any theaters that are actually opening up or anything like that. So it's kind of the news headline, movie theaters opening back up in Texas, sounds a lot better than governor makes it legal for movie theaters to open back up. One of those is like, oh, okay, well, I mean, what are they going to play in theaters? There's nothing to play.
Yeah,
it's not like anyone wants to go out really. So I don't know. They're not really opening. I mean, the big chains have said, hey, we're not opening back up until there's new movies to come out. So then it would just be some of these smaller theaters, and it's not. I can't imagine that they would do that. So it's a little bit, more of a political philosophy thing than actual statement on some of this other stuff. Just some porg with internet access with the super chat says, most satisfying villain death. Most satisfying villain death. I don't know, I'm trying to think of one that's just like super gnarly to where at the end of it, it's just like brutal destruction.
Maybe not the most brutal, but Hans Gruber's death at the end of Die Hard is.
That's of course
so
one that
good.
immediately comes to mind.
Yeah.
That's the first one I thought of, and even the backstory on it, that when they dropped Alan Rickman, it was supposed to be a countdown from 3, and they dropped him on 2, and so the reaction on his face, that's him really like making this face as he's dropped before he's expecting. And they did drop him like 40 feet into a pad. So that's one. This movie, Brawl in Cell Block 99, that I frequently talk about. If you want to see a movie where you get to the last little bit and this movie has set up the bad guys to just be like the devil, that you hate these bad guys, like what they're doing is so sick and twisted. And then it just kind of gives you like this, the ultimate feeding your bloodlust for about 5 minutes straight. I mean, it is gory, nasty. It's intentionally humiliating. I mean, it's so over the top. But Brawl in Cell Block 99 just has like the whoa! They just did that.
It's bad. Yeah, it's gnarly. Yeah,
super duper gnarly. So that one comes to mind. A name that is not in the English language, so I can't say it. Will you do more horror rankings? Oh, of course. I'll always do horror rankings. I put out a poll about a month ago asking which horror ranking people wanted me to do next, and they picked Paranormal Activity, and I haven't seen any of those movies, so I was like, oh, okay, new franchise. I'm not a big found footage guy, and so I probably set myself a little bit up for failure on that one. So they're not the easiest movie. They're not something I can just binge through. They're also not movies I own, and they're also not movies that are all on streaming services. Some of them are, but some of them aren't. And so that's why I would have had one maybe even recently. But I mean, I ranked the Phantasm franchise 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. So I mean, I did a horror ranking 2 weeks ago. It might not be the one franchise you wanted me to do, but I mean, Phantasm is a pretty classic film going back a long way. So, I mean, literally in the month of April, I did one. Next question. Some of you guys are asking me kind of like about my preferences between some movies and some stuff like that I've got videos on. Griffin's got videos on. I've got rankings on. And some of you guys are asking me to kind of do some big, gigantic, epic rankings. The question is always the practicality of it. To do a ranking, I have to rewatch all the movies. So if you want me to rank a list that's like a filmography of Steven Spielberg, he's done 30 movies. So that's 60 hours to do one video. That's a lot. That's a tough thing to do. Here's one that keeps popping up in here. Have you guys watched Triplets of Belize? I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that. So that's a big no. Like, I really have no clue what that is. All right, here's a question for you specifically. Da Vinci 3, what's better, John Wick or Mission Impossible?
Mm, I mean, what do you are we starting with Ghost Protocol and going forward, because that's kind of where the franchise, well, I guess you could say Mission Impossible 3 is the big turning point for the franchise. Um
It's easy for me. I would say if I had to go to an island, I was taking one of those franchises, it would be Mission Impossible. They're more rewatchable films that have a little bit more, they touch on a little bit more. John Wick movies
yeah.
they're like an experience. It's that like push through, like, man, that was awesome. They're not as like
Yeah.
rewatchable of films with as much kind of stuff in there.
Yeah, I was kind of leaning towards Mission. Yeah, no, you're right. Now I'm just thinking about it. Yeah. Yeah, I'd probably go Mission
And
Impossible.
raw
Yeah.
numbers. There's more of them, so there's more movies to watch.
Right,
But
I guess that's true. Yeah.
I mean, you don't have one that's kind of the dud of the mix with John Wick like you do with Mission Impossible 2. But then again, I mean, I think Mission Impossible, all of them except number 2, are very good to excellent.
Yeah.
I mean, even 1 and 3, I still think are just great little movies that are.
Oh, absolutely. And even 2 is just like, it's bad, but it's just like so ridiculous that it's like kind of funny to watch.
Yeah, yeah, it's it kind of weird choices, odd directions to
Yeah.
take things. But once you get to like the action stuff, I love John Woo action. So
Oh
doing that with
yeah,
Tom
yeah.
Cruise and people sometimes associate John Woo with martial arts stuff, which is actually because kind of racist. But like he's
Yeah.
known for gunfight stuff. He did a Van Damme
Yeah.
film, but even his Van Damme film it's he's running around with double guns and shotguns and stuff. And so then you even get a couple more cool martial arts shots in his Mission Impossible movie than you actually get from his other stuff. And so it's just a really weird, dull first hour of overly long shots with a romance you don't care about too much. Brandon Caterpillar, this one's probably you'll have a lot to say on this one. Do you like The Nice Guys and thoughts on it?
Oh yeah, I love that movie. I think it's one of the most underrated films of like, God, I don't know, the past decade or more. Like it's so well written and well acted and smart. That is like, that's the Shane Black that I want to see more of. Like
Yeah.
Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys. Those two, like even Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is really underrated when you think about it. But The Nice Guys especially is just like, it's got a lot of style. It's a lot of fun. It's got a great mystery, like an incredible pairing of Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling. Like, what more can you want? It's such a good movie. So good.
And what makes Shane Black's career so weird is that he goes between these small noir LA based stories and
Yeah.
then big, highly divisive to like whatever the Predator was franchise films. And like the Predator, you're like, I desperately want a documentary about on what happened here. Like what is
Yeah.
this thing?
Yeah.
But so I've only seen it once. I think I'd had it overhyped to me, and then I watched it like when I wasn't in the best frame of mind to like really give it its due. So I haven't gotten a good watch of it to be able to comment too much. I've technically seen it though. Ryan Green, will you review the new Clone Wars series when it ends? I plan to have a review on Monday. That'll be my Marvel Monday. Will be a Star Wars movie. So it's throwing my whole schedule off, messing everything up. Neek
Jeez,
Nerd.
come on, Sean.
I know, man. I had this whole
Marvel Monday,
Marvel
not
Mondays,
Star
top
Wars
10
Monday.
Tuesday, and it's all
Mm.
ruined now. Neek,
How
Nerd,
dare
Geek,
you.
are you excited about the Parks and Rec reunion? I'm more nervous about it. I'm actually kind of nervous because whenever you have a reunion like that, they don't have the best track record. So I mean,
Yeah.
because it's scripted, I'm interested. If it was unscripted, I'd be like, I don't care about this. But it's scripted, so. But when it's kind of this surprise, we're doing this thing for charity. Cool. I don't know what to make of that. Do you guys read
Yeah.
comic books? Yeah, I think you might read more than I do. I think.
I mean, I haven't recently. I think you probably have me beat there recently.
Sorry.
But yes, I do. Yeah.
So I've got a whole little section of graphic novels right over there. Jack Alexander, will you ever rank the Uncharted games? So I'd recommend you follow me on Twitter and Instagram. If you follow me on Twitter and Instagram, you would have seen a post from just a couple days ago where basically confirmed that's coming very, very soon. Specifically, my very first video game ranking will be the Uncharted games, just the main one. The first 4 probably next week. Name, I don't know how to say it. Have you watched the Da Vinci Code trilogy? I've seen the first 2. I haven't seen the third one. I didn't really like any of them all that much. The book, the Da Vinci Code, the book, I actually read it in an airport in one sitting. I was flying back to college and my flight got delayed, and I've got certain personality quirks, and so I didn't follow up on all the stuff to get my free hotel, and so I just stayed at the airport on a bench, and it was in Atlanta, and I guess homeless people sleep inside of the airport, and so I'm just sitting on this bench, and then around midnight, all these people just kind of keep coming in, and I was young enough that I was just kind of freaked out by this, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna just sit here and read the Da Vinci Code, and so I just sat there, and in one sitting read the book, the Da Vinci Code, and the book works a little bit better for something so exposition heavy. Because it's like this adventure that's really about, and then they go this place and they hear a history lesson, and they go this place and they hear a history lesson, and that's not a very good movie. So I had a lot of problems with both of the films. I didn't particularly care for either one. How about you?
Yeah. I really like the first 2. The third one is actually terrible. And I just like recently rewatched the trilogy last year with Tyler. We couldn't believe how bad the third, like there is a big dip in quality from 2 to 3. Really big. I love Angels and Demons, actually. I thought that was a pretty good translation. And like that movie just moves really fast. The Hans Zimmer score is excellent. I love how they're using like the Vatican as the set piece, and Ewan McGregor is excellent. The first one is good. It's just really slow, and especially if you're watching like the extended edition, oh my god. Yeah, I don't know, but I do have a soft spot for the first 2 movies in that trilogy.
So Raymond Warren asks, what's your opinion on the Now You See Me news? We had a whole section on this at the main part of the podcast. So just what you can go back through this, whenever it's done. Maybe you can replay it now, but it's in there. Super chat for some porg with internet access. Plans for May the 4th be with you. Yeah, I'll be finishing up watching Clone Wars, and then it'll probably be a review of the season. I haven't 100% decided, but I'm pretty sure I'll review the season. So that's my big plan. I don't have anything interesting about it. You have any May the 4th plans?
Definitely not content wise, but just like in general, no. I mean, I'm kind of burnt out of Star Wars at the moment.
Retrospective on Rise of Skywalker, shot by the commentary, watch party, top 10 favorite moments from Rise of Skywalker.
Spoiler alert, I still don't like it.
Okay, on those lines, question for you from John Early.
Yeah.
Do you hate Quantum of Solace, Griffin?
No, absolutely not. I'm very vocal about the fact that I think that movie is criminally underrated. I think it's an excellent epilogue to Casino Royale. And like, yes, while it's not as good of a film as Casino Royale, it's the next logical story point. And I think the emotional journey that Bond goes on there, dealing with loss, is different, and it's interesting, and really powerful. And I think there's a lot of great action, and I love the Bond girl, and it feels rooted in like the real world, which is, I mean, it's something like the Craig films have kind of done a little bit better job of, but like the way that Quantum sort of explores the geopolitics of like our time, just, it feels like Dominic Green, who is like holding this country for ransom to gain access to its water supply. That feels like a real life villain. So, yeah, I love it. I really do love Quantum.
Jonas Diaz, for both of you, what's your favorite action movies or action franchises from the 2000s? So if we're just talking about that decade, the 2000s, I have to think about that one. That's a good question, because the genre has changed quite a bit since the 90s. I mean, 80s, 90s, obviously you had all these big iconic action movies and franchises. And then we kind of had that shift towards these mega blockbusters, PG-13 event films, and comic book movies and everything around year 2000. And so you don't have as many of them. And I think the teens had more of those distinctive ones because of John Wick, The Raid, The Return of Mad Max. It just seemed to kind of
Yeah.
Those are the ones specifically, and you talked about them a lot in here. But if you're talking about the zeros, action movies, just straight up action movies, that's also the. I guess the other one is you have a lot of those Jason Statham films were in there, but they weren't.
Yeah,
They didn't,
Frank, the bank job. Yeah.
but they didn't quite become those. None of them were big hits. Even like the Transformer movies, they were solid money earners, but they weren't massive hits. So
I mean, it has to be the Bourne trilogy, right? Like the Bourne trilogy, like that defined action for like an entire generation, I think.
So yeah, I think that's Bourne would be one that I think kind of cut through, and once again became kind of a PG-13 event franchise. I mean, those movies started just becoming bonkers successful. So Bourne is an obvious one. Taken is one.
Yeah.
Because you had Mission Impossible 3 in the middle there.
Yeah, but that didn't make as big of a splash.
Yeah, no. It came out.
Yeah.
That was right when Tom Cruise was jumping on couches in love with Katie Holmes and going on interviews where like, you don't know the science. I know the science.
Oh my God. Go rewatch that Matt Lauer interview. It's one of the most cringeworthy things you've ever seen. But it's also really funny to watch Matt Lauer get his ass handed to him, given, what's happened to him. So,
if you look up Tom Cruise, Matt Lauer, Tom Cruise, Oprah couch, if you don't know what we're talking about, and all of this happened like right there when Mission Impossible 3 was coming out. And for this guy that has like a 40-year long career as this big A-lister, and then this bizarre little window of,
it's so weird.
It's
like what? Like what? It's so weird because he doesn't even feel like the same person now. I don't know whether it's like his publicist telling him to like, hey man, put on a good face when you're out in public, but like even like the people who work with him think he's delightful. So it's just like, what happened during this weird like?
Yeah, that's
the early 2000s.
Kind of played out, and you go, is that just if you spend that much time trying to. You spend that much time in that much public scrutiny trying to sell a product, your movies, and give off a good impression. Do you just have that point in time where you snap, and where, Britney Spears had it in her mid-20s and Tom Cruise was able to delay it until his mid-40s? Was it something like that, to where it was just like he hit a point in time where it's like he snapped a little bit or whatever? But I mean, because it wasn't just weird jumping on a couch, which in and of itself was like, this is the least normal thing I've ever seen in my life. Nobody does this. And he was smiling and giddy while doing it. And then the next week he does his interview with Matt Lauer where he's like dead serious, talking about depression medications or something. I've read the science. What is going on here?
I know. He's like, oh, you're so glib. I'm like, what? Like, what? Yes, please just if any of you are curious, like as to who Tom Cruise was during the early 2000s, just watch the YouTube video. I've gone down a rabbit hole. I like whenever I do that, I'm there for the rest of the day. It's just so funny.
I think it's also just because I think it also highlights, you go, wait, how much have we really gotten to know Tom Cruise? Because there's certain celebrities where you feel like you get like that's just their personality, and you like Chris Pratt. You feel like, okay, I feel like I know what this guy is like, what his real personality is, the things he's actually interested in. It seems like it's right there, out there, present in front of you. There's a lot. The Rock, it feels like that's kind of, he's definitely playing up this persona, but you feel like that's pretty genuine. Whereas Tom Cruise, you feel like you only ever see Tom Cruise, the movie star. And then this weird deal from 15 years ago where he's jumping on couches and lecturing people.
It's like,
oh,
that's the real Tom Cruise. Cruise. Well, the other thing is I don't mean to keep continuing this tangent, but do you remember that Scientology documentary that came out where I think it was called Going Straight or something like that, where it was like they would go into this Church of Scientology and there would be like a freaking like portrait of him, and they would like salute the portrait of Tom Cruise. Like, it is You can't even make up the absurdity that just like surrounds this man's life. It's ridiculous.
Tom Cruise. All right, Da Vinci 3 with the super chat said, I think Disney should only do live action remakes on old Disney films instead of newer ones like Lion King, because the older ones can be improved upon. Yeah, so it's kind of a weird. We've talked about this before in regards to Bob Iger. So
Yeah.
Bob Iger was the CEO from like 2005 until the year 2000, and then he resigned for a week, and then he came back because of everything going on in the world. So he left, and he came back basically to like, let's not do this massive transition right now. And the big thing is that his whole strategy is what's safe bets. Like, what's a guaranteed hit? How do we get a whole bunch of guaranteed hit movies that we can build franchises out of, that we can build attractions out of? And that's his whole strategy. And it made bazillions of dollars. So there's a side to it of like, well, should they have like remade The Lion King? What could you make better about The Lion King? Make better about it? Well, nothing really. But how much money can you still make out of The Lion King? And there's a side to it where you say, oh, that's disgusting. That's gross that they would do that. And why would you make a decision like that? Like, okay, well, let's also step back. You're running a company and you're pretty sure you can make over $1 billion with this thing that you have. And it would make more money than any of these other things you're thinking. You wouldn't do that? If you really thought you'd make over $1 billion, you wouldn't do that? I don't know that I believe you. I believe that you might leverage that $1 billion it made better than Bob Iger has. Because Bob Iger played it so safe. He didn't do let's do Lion King and then let's give Brad Bird $150 million for whatever he wants to do. And let's give Andrew Stanton another chance. Is it Stanton? Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Andrew Stanton another chance. Like, John Carter isn't the only thing you do. He gets $150 million. So Bob Iger hasn't done that. And I think that's the real legit criticism. But I think it made $1 bazillion. There was demand for it. People wanted it. Did they see it and go, maybe I didn't want that afterwards? Yeah, but did they want the novelty of it? I think so. And I don't think that part is inherently the worst. I think there's sides to it of like when they put 4 out in a year where I go, what are you doing? And you're doing like, let's take a risk on Dumbo with Tim Burton for $150 million, but we're not giving $150 million to Brad Bird, these Pixar classic guys. It's that other side that bugs me more so than just greenlighting heartless projects.
Yeah. Right. No, for sure. I think in regards to the question, should Disney only do live action remakes of old Disney films over newer ones? I think it's really a case by case basis, because I think there's a lot of newer ones like Atlantis, like Treasure Planet, that would really benefit
we've talked
from
about
a live
that a couple
action
times
remake.
on here.
Yeah.
That like that I watched that for the first time ever last fall. I thought, oh, I missed this one. I think a lot of other people did too. And this feels like a live action movie.
Yeah. Especially Atlantis, man. That would be a lot of fun. Another one that, like, I think would actually translate really well, and they're actually working on, which I'm happy to hear, is The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Just because I think that one kind of got lost in the shuffle during the Disney Renaissance, but arguably has some of the best music and like most cinematic, animation sequences out of the entire Renaissance. So it's really a case by case basis. Because Black Cauldron. That's an older, Disney movie that no one talks about and it's like really forgotten. So yeah, that's kind of where I am with that.
Red Panda asks, will you do a ranking of the Purge movies? I have a ranking of the Purge movies, all the ones that currently exist, and I'll update it whenever the next one comes out. I'm almost positive that'll happen. So it already exists. So once you're done with this live stream, you can check that out. Just some porgs with internet access. Favorite Clone Wars arc? Mine is the Umbara arc. I'm not really an expert on Clone Wars. I've tried to not present myself that way. So I've seen the entire show. I can't say that I couldn't break down which arcs are which arcs really. And I watched through it for the first time a number of years ago. I mean, I think that season 7 most all of it has been really nice little arcs that tie into things from the show as well as the movies in ways. That's the stuff that's interesting to me. So there's newness, not bias there, and there's just a little bit of like it's what's fresh on my mind and what I can point to. But like I really like what they've done with these last recent episodes of bringing Ahsoka Tano back in, and like how does this tie in with Revenge of the Sith timeline? I think that's been really cool.
Yeah. I think for me, it's the Mortis stuff. When they go and they're like basically with the Children of the Force. That's like for a lot of people, I think that's the best one, and it's really where I think Dave Filoni gets an excellent opportunity to like explore the mythology. I think sometimes, I mean, granted, it's a kids' TV show and it's animated. It can be a little too literal, but like I just think those episodes it really just changed the course of this series. Like that season was already getting pretty dark, but then when those episodes happened, wow, it just didn't even feel like a kids show anymore. And then the next episode was like Darth Maul's like cousin or whatever is just like ripping apart like clone troopers and Jedi, and it's just like, whoa, this is like intense stuff. So I loved those arcs.
All right, here's one. Tony Movie Chappie. Hey, Sean and Griffin, have you guys seen Cool World? Very underrated animated film. I haven't. I know what you're talking about. I haven't seen it. Do you know what Cool World is?
No.
So it's I think it's early 90s. I believe Brad Pitt's in it, and it's like he gets swept up into like a animated world, and so it's like part animation, part real world.
Weird.
And like noir, I believe, kind of crime film. But I never saw it, but that sort of thing. Either. Movie Micah, best comic book movie villain.
I mean, it's not very original, but it's like Heath Ledger's Joker, personally.
Or Doctor Doom from Fan Four Stick.
Right. Actually, I think you won this one
pretty safely. Yeah, I mean, Heath Ledger's Joker is great. Thanos is, of course, great one in the MCU. Magneto throughout the X-Men mythology. I don't have like a deep, interesting cut. There's a handful that are, whether it's Heath Ledger's Joker that just had this one movie that just popped so much, or some of these other ones that they were just kind of woven into the mythology so well and developed better that are just kind of the obvious picks.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. There's like full conversations going on.
Yeah.
What is Griffin's channel? It's Film Speak. I think if you just look up Griffin, I'm sure that his stuff will come up. But Film Speak. It's in the description of a lot of my. Sometimes I forget to put them in there, but I need to get some text that I just always have in there. But Film Speak is if you look it up or Griffin Schiller, and you'll find him.
Actually, I'm gonna see what happens when you type my name into YouTube. I'm fascinated.
Eric Thorpe, will Die Hard 6 happen? I have a lot of doubts. They haven't gotten it off the ground at this point in time, because they've been talking about doing this McClane that's a origin story for John McClane that everyone was like, that sounds like a terrible idea. You're missing the whole point of it. And they have to know that everybody, they of course know that everybody hated the last one. And then they put out an idea where people are like, this is somehow even worse than that last idea that you had. So it seems like they're not. What I don't get is why it feels like they're just so creatively bankrupt with this franchise. They seem to have interest in making something happen, but instead of getting anyone interesting to work on it, they're just getting whoever will take the job for the paycheck or whatever. Like the people that they got to do A Good Day to Die Hard, the last Die Hard movie, it's a terrible movie. It's like only guys known for making bad films for studios. It's like the script is from a guy named Skip Woods, who did like X-Men Origins Wolverine. It's just like a bunch of stuff that it's like, maybe the guy's the friendliest guy ever, an amazing screenwriter. He just keeps getting the wrong assignments, but he's only been attached to bad franchise movies. And then the director is the guy that did the Max Payne movie. And that's who they had make. It's like you went, oh, you made a bad action movie that nobody liked and no one thought was respectful of the source material, even though the source material was primed to be converted into a movie. How about we give you Die Hard? And once again, maybe he's the nicest guy ever. Maybe he's just got the wrong projects. But I don't understand why they're making the choices that they're making with who they're getting to work on it. Because even getting Len Weissman, the guy that did the fourth one, did pretty well. I mean, it did well at the theaters. Financially, it's made the most money. It didn't sell the most tickets, but it made the most money. And it was considered a hit. It was a guy that had his own little franchise, Underworld, had a distinct style. And so then they're like, let's take a risk on him and give him this franchise. Some people liked it, some people didn't. But then they went from that to literally generic scriptwriter guy and generic director guy to make horrible generic action movie. And then since then, it's literally just terrible ideas. Anyway, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Will it happen? No, probably not. I think just people are kind of burnt out from that. And I mean, it'll probably just get like rebooted in like a decade or so. I don't know. Maybe even less than that. I just can't see it actually happening.
Yeah. And it's kind of one of those, to the conversation we've kind of been having this whole time, that they're probably figuring out that, oh wait, the action genre it's gone niche. It's not what it was before, per literally the whole conversation we had earlier of, there was a point in time where Die Hard with a Vengeance is going to be a big gigantic hit summer movie. That still kind of worked when the fourth one came out. But movies like that are just kind of these straightforward action movies just are not the big hits. And so then in order to try and make another big hit out of Die Hard, you turn it into a modern day blockbuster rather than whatever Die Hard has always been. And I just don't think that doesn't sound appealing to probably anyone. And you lose the whole point of it, because the built-in audience that are going to be pumped about a Die Hard movie want a Die Hard movie, and they're already kind of burned out. And the younger people that want this big PG-13 spectacle film don't have the brand recognition. So that's where you just have so much trouble in doing something with the Die Hard franchise. It's why Terminator Dark Fate just failed at the box office. People that did see it were split on it, but not even that many people went to go see it. So because they're just so burned on it, and the industry's not where it was before. We're going to go for just like maybe 10 more minutes, 5-10 more minutes. So if you definitely want us to answer your question, send it in as a super chat. We'll jump on that one, and we'll try and grab a few of these as quick as we can and close out right as we're about at the 2-hour mark on here. So if you want to make sure we answer it, send it in as a super chat. Hey guys, hey Sean and Griffin, what's your favorite comedy film?
I think mine is This Is the End. With like Seth Rogen and all his buddies. That movie just consistently makes me laugh. It's so clever.
I honestly have no clue. People ask me, hey, you should do top 10 comedies. I just don't really, because if I do a video like that, I want it to be an actual list of comedies. I don't want to be like Ghostbusters. I mean, Ghostbusters is a very funny movie, but it's also a horror. It's a lot of different things. And that's where it gets tricky. I love comedy in movies. I'm just not as drawn to just straight up comedies as much. They just don't pop out to me, and they don't, and it typically connect with me in the way where it's in and of themselves. Is I just don't really have a favorite. Maybe like The Wedding Singer, but even that's more a rom-com. It's very much, it has that rom side to it. So I really don't have an answer. Sebastian, what's your favorite movie of the Bad Boys trilogy? I think the latest one is the best balance of everything the franchise has to offer.
Still haven't seen it.
How dare you? How dare you?
No, I know.
Have you seen the previous two?
No, I've actually never watched any of the Bad Boys movies. No.
For a group of people, they're classics. I've never been Bad Boys. These are classics, anything like that. The first one, it's interesting because you're watching Will Smith and Michael Bay before they were Will Smith and Michael Bay. And so you see that they've always kind of been like that, but also a little bit more restrained. Like when things blow up, there's still fireworks inside of it, but there's not as many fireworks as you get later on. And then you get the second one, and this is after Michael Bay's become big, gigantic director guy that gets all the money he wants, but he's doing just a straightforward action movie. So it's just a typical buddy cop action movie, except with this insane over-the-top budget for Michael Bay. And so it's kind of is maybe the most over-the-top, unnecessarily epic, just straight-up action movie that we've ever gotten. Because, there's no superheroes, there's no Transformers, there's none of this sci-fi stuff to justify some of these things. And so it's just Michael Bay, peak Michael Bay, which is kind of amazing. But it's also like, the movie has like 3 finales in a row. You go, oh, I guess this is the end. Nope. We've got 30 more minutes and we're going straight into the next finale.
Yeah.
This time with helicopters.
So,
It just keeps on going and going. And the third one, I think, balances all out, that it has the fun of all of that, but it also has more heart and character moments.
Yeah. I mean, I have all 3 movies. I just need to watch them.
Let's see. Questions. Trying to find the perfect question. I think you've answered this one before. Is Age of Ultron the most visually interesting MCU film?
Yeah, I feel like we've answered that. I think it is. Visually, yeah, but I mean, it's not that great of a movie. So,
here's a fun controversy. Should Universal now give us Fast 9 on its original release date, May 22nd on VOD? I mean, it'll never happen. Man. But that would be the ultimate middle finger to the theaters. Let's burn all bridges, be. But we're Universal, so we're going to do what we want. That would be amazing. / what a horrible idea. If you just want to burn the whole system down, you do that.
Yeah.
Sebastian, what is the worst Conjuring movie? That first Annabelle is pretty dreadful. And The Nun is really boring.
I think The Nun probably is the worst one. Maybe. I don't know. You're right. The first Annabelle is pretty bad. We'll go Annabelle. Yeah.
So Annabelle, I thought, was just like a bad movie that had some interesting things that tied things together. The Nun was more boring though.
It's just it's like, how do you waste that? Like, that is just like, it's an idea that like could very well work and you do nothing with it.
Here's an interesting one. What would you say is the oldest movie you've ever seen? So I think I've seen King Kong, the original King Kong. So I think that's 1933. Yeah. That would probably be the oldest. For most people, it's probably The Wizard of Oz.
I think Metropolis came out before both of those, right? Fritz Lang? Yeah, that might be the oldest one I've seen.
So I think that's like 29.
Yeah.
Metropolis, let me look that one up. Actually, King Kong is 33, so I was right. Metropolis 27.
Yeah, okay. So that might be the oldest one I've seen.
We always kind of get questions on this one. Corvin, do you think Matrix 4 will be good? I mean, I don't think number 3 set them up for success. The Wachowskis don't have a great track record since the original Matrix, and I have no idea what it's going to be. So, I'm interested because it's like, wow, they're coming back. What are they going to do with this? So it's interesting. Will it be good?
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
I don't even know. Yeah, I don't know.
So, and when you don't know anything beyond, they're coming back with the original cast. You go, what?
Yeah, I'll have to wait for that first trailer to decide whether I'm on board or not.
That's right. Like some people, since as of right now, they're Matrix 4 and John Wick 4 scheduled for the same day. So there's a lot of people like, which one are you more excited for? If they're put out in theaters right now and I just have to pick one, I haven't seen a trailer for either. I'm going to go see The Matrix. Not because
really? I'd probably go for John Wick 4.
But so I'm confident John Wick 4 is much safer bet that it'll be good. But Matrix 4 is way more interesting because I know what John Wick 4 is going to be. I mean, you just kind of like they set up the scenario. You know the betrayals. You know which factions are still out there that John Wick wants revenge on. You know what the style's going to be like. So you know exactly what that movie is going to be. It'll blow our minds with the action. They're going to like push forward stunt work and stuff like that. But I know what it's going to be. Matrix 4? It's like it's just no clue. And that to me, I think has a little bit more intrigue. But that's literally the question is, without seeing a trailer for either movie, without really even knowing the premise of Matrix 4, which movie do you want to see? Well, in that case, I'm just going to go with the one that just seems fully bonkers out there weird of that they're even doing this. Yeah. Just some pork with internet access with the super chat. Thank you so much. Your Hogwarts house. I'm a Hufflepuff.
I am. Well, I've taken it twice and I've gotten different answers both times. So I don't know whether it's probably on personal error, but I've gotten Gryffindor and Ravenclaw. So
I've never taken a test on it, so I unfortunately do not know at all my Harry Potter house or Hogwarts house.
Oh, that was part of the question. I thought you were saying you're a Hufflepuff. That's
no. He was saying he's a Hufflepuff. He was telling us.
Gotcha.
I don't even know what any of those mean. I know if I'm Slytherin, it means I'm awesome, and that's all I know. But I don't really follow Harry Potter enough to be super knowledgeable. Andrew Arrington, did you see The Platform? Yeah, I saw The Platform at a film festival last September. So I saw it 6 months before everybody else. I talked about it in my ranking of the movies at Fantastic Fest, and then I talked about it again in my ranking of, I think it's March releases, whichever the last video I did of ranking all the movies released that month. So I've talked about it a couple of times on my channel. I thought it was an interesting comment. Have you watched that one yet?
No, not yet. No, I've heard it's like pretty good, but
contained film with a message that, especially right now, can be a little bit relevant. So there's some good stuff in there. Man, it's gross at certain points in time. It's a whole lot in there. Oh, actually, there we go. It's a couple of there it is. Actually, I had the question twice. All right, I'm going to look for a couple final questions. If you really want us to answer your question, send it in real quick. We're going to close out once I can find a couple good, solid questions to end on. Nice try. Is The Platform really about communism? It's not really about communism, because communism is a government structure that forces communism is like, let's take government forcing everyone to have the same amounts. And so it's very much about government doing something. The movie itself is about how, as individuals, people are choosing to take for themselves rather than think about others. They're indulging while they have it. And so that's not really, and I wouldn't call that an argument for communism. I view that as an argument for the individual to think about other people more. So I think that's the problem with sometimes people see these things where it's any sort of criticism of the selfishness of individuals, and people point to that's an argument, therefore communism. No, not at all, because communism is government forcing something. That's not the same thing as individuals choosing to do something. Have you seen Three Idiots? No, it's very much on my mind, though. I very much have it. I have it on my mind. Todd Barker, give up. You clearly don't want to read my messages, Sean. I just read one, so it's not that at all. There's a lot of messages, and you might be asking a question that I just don't have an answer to. So there's a lot of different reasons, but it's not that. I don't know which one you're sending, because there's literally 200 people in here sending messages. So
I think he was sending something about like movie quizzes or doing movie quizzes or something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah, I just don't have a thought in this context to talk about movie quizzes.
I don't even know.
That's why I just didn't have a thought on it. Adam Langley, do you think Daredevil should appear in Spider-Man 3? Should he? There's too many questions to that. Do I think it's possible that it could happen? I think it is mildly within the realm of possibility, but very unlikely that would happen because the rights don't revert to. Actually, I think it's more complicated than that because I think the rights revert to Marvel. Spider-Man 3 is Sony, and there's no reason that Marvel would want to lend the rights to Sony for that movie because they're obviously, mom and dad aren't getting along very well and they broke up last fall. So why would they then adopt another kid together? Why would they do that? There's a lot of analogies in there, but I just don't see. I think that's where you start thinking through how complicated some of that is that I don't see that happening.
Yeah. Also, Charlie Cox said that he has no, because someone asked him whether or not Daredevil was going to be in Spider-Man 3, and he was like, I've heard nothing about that. No. So.
CB's Home Media Reviews. Can I use Taco Bell movies for my channel? Go for it. I'm not someone that gets...
It's a brand. How dare you steal this man's brand?
You can. I just need you to pay me $1,000 every time you do it. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
If people want to copy my thumbnails, my titles, my video concepts, use my Taco Bell term, I really don't care at all. This is that's a scarcity mindset on some of the stuff where people perceive that, well, if you do what I'm doing too, then you're taking away from me. I just don't think that way. I think we're all partners, and the more great content, more great discussions are going on out there, the better. Like right now, some people bringing up John Campy in the live stream and having opinions and debating him, and I'm watching you instead of him, and I'm not interested in any of that. I'm John Campy inspired me to start, so I'm not. I'm only a fan of his. Would only publicly say positive things. So I just don't believe in some of that stuff. The Martin Show. Have you watched the Nostalgia Critic? I really haven't watched the Nostalgia Critic. Have you watched any of the Nostalgia Critic stuff?
Yeah, I don't like his content at all. It's just really rooted in complaining and ranting, and it just is not enjoyable to watch at all.
And I really haven't watched much. There's just the little snippets I've seen had an energy that just wasn't the energy that I'm all that interested in. So that's not a channel I've checked out. And then, like you said, some of that stuff where it's kind of ranting and raving about stuff, not really for me. Iron Cafe, have you watched Jeremy Johns? I've seen tons and tons of Jeremy Johns. I'll tell you guys this real quick without can't say much more than this. I've in the last week reached out to him a little bit, maybe having him on the podcast, and had a little back and forth conversation with him. No date, no confirmation, nothing like that. Nothing may come of it, but he was generally speaking positive about the idea without being committal at the same time. So just throw that in there real quick as a tease for what could happen in the future. Some of you guys are asking about kind of Scoob and some 1917. We've talked about that a lot on the podcast before, so that's why I'm not jumping on some of your questions. All right.
Just a lot of 1917 or Dunkirk spam.
Yeah, there's just a lot of questions that they're just questions that we've talked about a few too many times. Like Scoob has been a headline topic for this podcast, even recently. So that's why we're not discussing it again. Guess we'll close out on this one. Macho Nacho, what movie do you hate the most? Anyone that's a longtime subscriber to my channel knows that for me, that is the movie Alien 3. Rewatched the movie Aliens this last week because it was Alien Day. And just affirmed my hatred for Alien 3. I can't fathom why someone would watch the movie Aliens and they went, the idea that I'm excited about to continue Aliens is this concept. Like that's to me, I go, I can see where some of the other bad movies in the franchise, there's an idea there that I know why the person got excited about it. And like, oh, this is a cool new direction to take it with the characters and everything. But the last thing that I would want to do after watching Aliens is the thing that they did in the first 10 minutes of Alien 3. That's the worst for me, or most hated for me. How about you?
The one that always comes to mind is Pan, that horrible Peter Pan movie with Hugh Jackman, directed by Joe Wright. Very unpleasant viewing experience. I don't know what the hell I watched, and it was terrible. It was just flat out terrible.
All right, I'll throw a couple of these real quick that I can answer. Hey guys, Sean, can you do a tier list ranking? I think that would be fun to watch. I've actively chosen not to do it because like Austin Burke and some other people are already kind of in that space. And what I try not to do is if someone cuts out a niche for themselves in this very crowded movie space, I don't like to take ideas from people with smaller channels. And I just try to avoid doing that. For the simple fact that like I want them to have their own room to play there. And not that, like I said, I don't really believe in kind of a scarcity mindset, but I like that to apply to more so to me than not taking downward. I just don't feel comfortable doing that. So that's why I haven't. Maybe at some point I would, but it's very much I've been like, other people are doing that. I'm not short on ideas, so I want other people to kind of run with that. All right. I didn't quite see any more quick ones to someone's asked me about having Chris Stuckman on. He's another person I've reached out to. I've told my story about meeting him before, and I would imagine at some point in time that would happen, but we don't have a date or anything like that. So someone keeps asking me about Batman or Superman. Yes is my answer to your question. I like both of these archetypes of two, and I say that on my channel a lot. I like them as the two archetypes. Do you have a preference between Batman and Superman?
I mean, probably Batman, but I agree. I kind of like them as the two archetypes, you know.
And when I say that, I mean, one is the human that had deep tragedy in his past that uses everything he can to use the best of his abilities to stop anyone else from suffering. So that's kind of this archetype of what human possibility to stop others from suffering. The other one is the God on earth with all the power to do whatever he wants, and he chooses to use that power for the good of others. Yeah, and those are two kind of superhero archetypes of man and Superman, literal Superman, or demigod of sorts, or God on our planet of sorts. And that's what are interesting to me. And close out on these two. This will be the actual final two. Mr. Mangohead Jr., can you invite YMS on your podcast? That's Your Movie Sucks on the podcast. I don't know him. I'm not super familiar with his stuff. He follows me on Twitter, and I follow him on Twitter. But we've never actually directly interacted with each other. So I'm not familiar with his stuff. Based off his name and the little snippets I've seen, I think tone-wise, it's probably not a good fit. My understanding is it's a little bit more of kind of a rant, angry channel, and that's just the opposite of what mine is. And what I try to have this be about is kind of a love for movies. And we might love different movies, we might dislike certain things, but it's coming from that positive perspective of there's this oozing this kind of passion to talk about movies. And any channels that kind of have that just always want to punch down at stuff, and that's just not at all the kind of the vibe that I have. So there's not a no. I just don't know the guy, and my understanding is it wouldn't seem like a good fit. Are you familiar with the channel?
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't know who that is. Yeah.
And we'll close out on this super chat from Colin Williams. Sean and Griff and I are doing Sean. That's not one I read too fast and turned it all into one thing. Sean, my name with an exclamation mark. Griffin and I are doing Deadpool versus Birds of Prey this week. Can't wait. Okay, so if you don't know what he's talking about, Colin Williams and I, a few weeks back, did kind of movie versus movie over on his channel. He has a lot of content very similar to mine, talking about movies, trying to have the fun conversations you have between people. And so he does a series where he takes two movies that have some similarities and kind of debates them. So him and I did Baby Driver and Drive a few weeks back. And so I guess what he's telling me is that Griffin, you and him are going to be debating Deadpool versus Birds of Prey. Because you said on this podcast, Birds of Prey is better than Deadpool.
Yeah,
so,
and I still maintain that.
If you want to see Griffin defend that will be over on Colin Williams' channel. Like I said, if you enjoy the content on my channel, it's similar sorts of stuff over on Colin. So check that one out. Also, very, very important, be sure to head on over to Griffin's channel, Film Speak, to subscribe to his stuff. He's got some very cool editorials on there on various subjects. And as we talked about earlier on here, he did an interview with the director of Assassin's Creed that touched on some pretty cool stuff. So be sure to check that one out if you want to know the director's take on his own movie and where he would have gone with the franchise. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and keep talking movies too much. Oh, and Griffin, do you want to say bye to everybody?
Yes, goodbye, everyone. I hope you enjoy the live stream. We'll catch you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.